Right now it is time to bring in David Tereshchuk. It's time for the Media Beat. Of course, David joins us live on a Friday morning. We rebroadcast David also following the noon news on Monday, also over the course of the weekend as well. And we welcome him in with lots of things to talk about this morning. Good morning, David. Nice to have you on the air again.
Good to be back with you. Reporting in from another part of the English-speaking world, Dublin, Ireland.
I tell you, there's a phenomenon going on, David, and it's a great phenomenon. You know who isn't on the list to talk about?
Well, I hear that he's been given a new kind of handle that everyone now recognizes by his own successor, the former guy. That's the man that we don't talk about anymore. At least we don't have to if we don't want to, and
no.
I suspect we don't really want to.
No, we don't really want to.
That depends on the news, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I want to start off, first of all, not in this country. I want to start off with what's happening with Princess Latifah. This is a story that goes back a couple of years, where once again international people were fooled when they went to interview her. Now there's fear that she might even be dead, and now the UN is asking for proof. This is just one of those stories that makes you look at things like this and wonder, how can somebody so prominent be mishandled so much and not understood what's going on with her by not only media, but also by people at the UN and like that. It's an amazing story to me.
Sure. The former Irish president, in fact, Mary Robinson, was one of the international figures who was apparently misled, fooled, in fact, by the UAE, the United Arab Emirates government, who have been, one way or another, keeping Princess Latifah out of public view, and it's claimed by the princess herself in the recordings that she's made, essentially being held hostage. And that's the spotlight that this has cast on human rights violations in the UAE is extraordinary. And the BBC in particular has played a large part in revealing this with recordings made by the princess herself in a barricaded home in her bathroom, the only room, she says, where she can get privacy and lock the door. But of course, now she's disappeared. And the United Nations and many other people too, of course, are demanding that terrible phrase, proof of life, because the terrible fear is that she might have been killed. It's a very serious case of human rights violations, of course, and we will have to just watch carefully and you know, in terms of the media's job is to do a lot more digging. Though, of course, it's not exactly easy to dig in the UAE. But that's the journalist's job now, to try and get to the bottom of this. Yeah. Along with, of course, diplomats too, who are trying their best in the UAE capital.
You know, you look at that story, then I want to go into another story. Here in the United States of America, it has been shown that people of color have a less chance of getting vaccinated quickly than people who are white. Look at Canada. They've gone to making their now own vaccine because they can't get enough of a supply. And you look across the world and over to Europe once again, there's a call for wealthier nations to fess up and share in the vaccinations. This is a story that is very disturbing if you know anything about human nature.
Sure, it's a big day in international diplomacy today. It's the first time the G7, the rich nations of the world, that's basically the UK. Well, let's start with the richest, the US first, and then the UK and France, and Germany, Italy, Japan, and Canada get together as the G7. And they haven't actually met, although of course this is not a real in-person meeting. It's yet another of our COVID-impelled virtual meetings. It's a video conferencing by the leaders of all of these countries together. And top of the agenda is COVID, and in particular vaccines. And what's striking about it, I suppose, is that the chair of the G7 meeting for all of this year is Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the UK, and he's pledged his country to send whatever surplus vaccines the country has left over once it's caught up with vaccinating its own population to the poorer countries of the world, and much needed. Very evidently, from the evidence, it's very clear that those rich nations have, in fact, bought up. The word being used in the media over here is hoarded. They've hoarded 1 billion more vaccines than are actually needed by the rich countries' populations. Say, for the sake of argument, the numbers are like this in general terms: 2 billion population, and all in all, and if you give 2 doses to all those people, you end up with a number that is actually a lot less than the 3 billion doses of vaccine that those countries have now bought up. So the promise by one country to send their own surplus to the poorer countries is a striking bit of diplomacy. Now, the British government's being rather careful here. They're not saying exactly how many vaccines they're going to donate to the poorer world, but the pledge is there in black and white that the surplus, however that is calculated, by journalists here in the British Isles are guessing by the end of July, that will be the point where Britain will be able to say what the surplus actually is, and it'll be at that point that it is sent to the poorer world. But meantime, not to be outdone, of course, because this is something of a diplomatic game. Though I don't want to diminish its seriousness. President Emmanuel Macron of France has put a number and a quantity on it. He's saying that 5% of vaccines held by the French authorities are going to go to Africa. And he said that. This is an interesting piece of media management. He said that in the course of an interview in Britain's own Financial Times newspaper. So you can see that there's some jockeying here for the sort of superior moral position in this matter. But of course, it is shocking, though not surprising, that the rich countries should want to buy up what, in their view, of course, they paid for having researched in the first place. An awful lot of vaccines, an awful lot more vaccines than they actually need.
All right, I want to stay on foreign turf for a while. I don't agree with everything that our current president, Joe Biden, is doing. I agree with 99.9% of it. I'm interested to see. I've seen the initial way he is dealing with China, which I think represents the United States and the rest of the world well. And the next one is Iran. I really would hope that we could rejoin that pact and come to some sort of agreement with Iran. It would make the world very quickly a much, much, much safer place.
That's what the hope is. And certainly today's a signal day for President Biden, too, as well as this being the first G7 that's actually gathered at top leadership level since April of 2020. This is also the first G7 meeting that President Biden has attended. It's his first G7 since he took office, and there will be other occasions. There'll be a big summit and a more widely ranging summit that is in June in the southwestern part of England, in Cornwall. But this is his first get-together with his international peers, and he's prepared for it pretty dramatically in terms of rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, rejoining in full the World Health Organization, which Trump was trying to bring the United States out of, He's taken a new position on China, as you say, and he's opened up the possibility of opening negotiations again with Iran. So a whole new atmosphere established by the Biden administration on the world stage. And it has to be said that most of the rest of the world is welcoming this new openness.
Well, it's so funny because here in America, you get not the conservative media. We have to now separate the conservative media from the absurd media, it's amazing how this continues to grow. But I mean, you've got the One America Network, and you've got Newsmax, and Fox now is trying to outdo both those to get their viewers back. And it's the sleepy Joe Biden talk
and newer right-wing networks being set up even as we speak to rival Fox, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops in the year of the former guy trying to do what he can from Florida at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how that fight on the right wing takes place in media terms.
And so the sleepy Joe Biden talk, I happen to think, and like I said, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I happen to think that Joe Biden has turned out to be the perfect person in place at this time to once again take the presidency back to where it was. Yeah, he's not exciting to watch. He's not bombastic. He appoints people and he lets those people do what they need to do, and he is very controlled. And what he does, the town hall that he did was really, really great. Yeah, does he have a few stumbles? Yeah, every politician stumbles, whether it's the United States, the president of the United States or not. But I really think that he is a gift for this time where we needed to slow things down and get back to some sense of not normalcy, but just the sense of the way you treat people and the way you release information as a president.
The Irish, and I'm speaking from Dublin, of course, and I'm seeing this through Irish lenses in some way. And the Irish are great experts in the English language. In fact, when it's called the English language, I often think that we must remember that some of the best practitioners of English literature in many different forms, poetry, drama, and prose, are Irish, have been Irish, still remain Irish, and President Biden's own favorite poet, he's been careful to say, is the late Seamus Heaney, and he says, I don't keep quoting Irish poets because they're Irish. I keep quoting them because they're the best in the world. So we should pay attention to the words that the Irish use to describe Biden. After that town hall, Irish media were interestingly throwing up two particular words that I want to highlight. One is prolix, not a word we use very often in the media, I have to say, but prolix is a word that was used by one Irish commentator for Biden in the town hall that he held, because Biden does have a tendency, he's on lengthy record, of course, but using an awful lot of words when fewer words would probably do. That's the kindest interpretation of the word prolix I can give you at the moment. But the other word was steady, and I see the word solid being brought up a lot too. That's how much of the rest of the world is seeing Biden now, and I think they'd probably agree with you, Marshall, that it's good after all the unsteadiness of let's put it that way, the unsteadiness of the last 4 years, that it's a very welcome development to have a president of the biggest nation in the world, the richest nation in the world still, although China's creeping up on it, of course, the richest nation in the world being a steady nation now instead of an unsteady one.
We come back to this country, and we have to go to Texas because this has turned into such a big story. And the interesting thing, if you do reading up on it, when this whole thing started with the weather and the governor blaming it on the Green New Deal, I did.
Yes, non-fossil fuel energy generation is the culprit for what has happened to Texas. That's a stretch, and I think it's been very very firmly rebutted in most of the media that we've been seeing over this side of the Atlantic anyway.
Well, you're right, because the media has pointed out that 11 years ago this happened. This exact same thing happened in Texas. Texas is not on the national grid because they don't want to be regulated. Texas does not require energy producers to actually produce energy in times where they'll lose money. And so you had all that, and all the equipment that they installed, whether it was natural gas, whether it was windmills, whether it was solar, they decided not to winterize any of it, and it all came tumbling down in what is just absolutely I'll call it a Katrina of cold. It's sometimes the United States can look so beyond third. I'll call it fourth world with what happened, and what happened in Texas once again is just simply, people have got to learn the national grid is there for a reason. We have a federal government and state governments for a reason. They're there to help when you need help.
Yes, indeed. It's jaw-dropping for people this side of the Atlantic to consider what Texas's position has been on ensuring the safety and reliability of its energy system, to deliberately choose, on ideological reasons, that's what's being said, for ideological reasons, to refuse the kind of safeguards that the rest of the country has willingly gone in for, is mind-boggling. Certainly that's been the reaction of commentators on this side of the Atlantic, Irish in particular. And there's a particular, I have to say that there's a kind of glee at times amongst the Irish, especially when it seems that political leaders, particularly if they're self-righteous or particularly pompous, are somehow thrown into sharp relief by terrible events like this. Now, it's in a way it's funny, but it's also not funny that Senator Ted Cruz should take his family away for a lot warmer vacation away from the cold of Texas. And the response to that over here has been, as I say, particularly gleeful, but no more gleeful, I suspect, than the Texas media itself. I remember when I first went to Houston, I drove in from visiting my family in Austin, Texas. I drove into Houston 30 years ago now, to be greeted by a large sign proclaiming Houston to be the last refuge of Texans' rugged individuality. And now I see the Irish happily quoting the Houston Chronicle, talking about Senator Ted Cruz and saying that Senator Ted Cruz bought a ticket to paradise. Well, paradise can keep him.
Well,
that's the kind of reaction to politicians that the Irish really like.
Well, and it seems to be an amazing thing in America, where not only did he and his wife schedule the trip, the wife emailed people so they couldn't hide it. He lied about the fact that he just went with them to get them there and came right back. Then he restated the story that yes, we were going to stay, but when I got there, I just couldn't stay there. It's amazing. It's amazing how
I had to get back because I'm a responsible politician. Yes,
it's just amazing how in today's modern age, where I always say where everybody's got a cell phone, everybody can take a picture, everybody can record, that you think that you could get away with something like that. Now, as a senator, he doesn't have much control what goes on in Texas, but that's not the point. The point is, as a senator of Texas, he's got to be front and forward and come out and get involved and try to move things along. I mean, it went completely unnoticed that Joe Biden immediately through FEMA started sending supplies and medical equipment and also generators to Texas. And then people said, well, how come Joe Biden doesn't send the National Guard? Well, because Texas has to ask for the National Guard.
Yes, indeed. But he was able to do what he could do. And did it unprompted, also, or largely unprompted, except prompted, obviously, by circumstance, by a crying need. And I guess that's the oppositional case when we had so many years of being conditioned by that very glib but telling and obviously very resonant catchphrase that came from the Reagan area. President Reagan said, that I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It is the worst phrase that you could ever hear out of someone in authority's mouth. Well, there's another view of that, and another view is what the President of the United States does when one particular state gets into the terrible condition that it got into because of extraordinarily bad weather. We want to help, and that's what the federal government is in large part there to do, to help when an individual state itself cannot cope.
In bad weather and also just bad matter. If you don't learn from history, that old quote, you're doomed to repeat it. And now this is the third time this has happened in Texas in the last 30 years. So they can't claim it was this once in 100-year thing. But I want to wrap
and
it up.
The other instance, the other issue that the Cruz case raises, of course, is what kind of behavior you want from your leaders. It's not a matter of whether he could have fixed it. It's a question of what kind of example he sets for his fellow Texans in times of suffering. Do you suffer like the rest of the people, or do you make an exceptional case for yourself and remove yourself from discomfort? It has a very, very nasty ring to it.
All right, and this doesn't carry much newsworthiness around here, but I have to ask you about it because it's from your home country, and that is the news out of Prince Harry and Meghan are not going to ever return as working members of the royal family. And my question is, well, why should they?
Why should they? And the other question that often comes up in Britain that is not often reported in America, British people themselves saying, and why should we care?
Yeah, it's just, Prince Harry, he was born into being a prince, and Meghan Markle married him, and that should be the end. There is no commitment when he's born into royalty that he has to do what all the royals do, and it's been proven over the centuries. And I just, I have to tell you, I'm a fan of the royal family. They don't do any harm. I think they do more good than they do harm, and the emotional tides that can grip the country. So I'm a big fan of the whole situation there. But then it gets out of control when someone like Prince Harry, who's just going out to be married and be successful as it is, and it's made a big thing because it goes against the royal family.
Well, I speak not as a fan of the royal family. I'm neither a fan nor an enemy of the institution of monarchy. But what I can say as a member of the media is, heaven's sake, everybody, leave them alone.
Yeah. That's exactly it. That's
all I have to contribute on the subject.
And the one final thing, once again, when you see technology work and we send a satellite to hundreds of millions of miles, we control it to land on mountainous terrain, and then we will dispatch a drone on that planet, all hundreds of millions of miles away. You just have to shake your head and say, congratulations to all those people involved in it, because China now has a satellite orbiting. There's several other countries, but when you see these unbelievable feats, I mean, it's remote controlling something to perfection, but that's hundreds of millions of miles away. It makes me feel a little bit better about what goes on in this country.
Right. I think as people in the communications business like you and me, yes, to do it from here on Earth to there in Mars and then bring material back, it's again, I'm going to use that word that the Irish are fond of using. It's mind-boggling. and I'm very happy to have my mind boggled by such achievement.
Well, it's been a rather peaceful week, and we're glad for that, David. And how much longer are you over there now for?
Another couple of weeks,
Okay.
Marshall.
Well, you've picked a good time to be over there. I'll tell you what.
It's interesting. They say that January and February in Ireland is a test, but you know it's a lot warmer here than it is in Texas.
All right, David. We will speak to you next week.
Look forward to that.
Take care. David Tereshchuk with the Media Beat here on Robin Hood Radio. You can find David at the Media Beat on our on-demand page, robinhoodradio.com. Click on on-demand. Click on David Tereshchuk with the Media Beat. Of course, David is a PBS television correspondent, and he also reports on ethics and belief. And he has his own great website, themediabeat.us, as well as allowing us to probe various media events through his years and years and years of service, not only to our country, but his home country as well. The Media Beat with David Tereshchuk here on Robin Hood Radio.